You're listening to the Bob and Bo Show. Here are your hosts, Tybob, Tybo, and Sean. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I am Tybob, joined by Tybo. No Sean for the Chief Show this week. Just a little scheduling difference here. No issues. You'll hear him on the NFL show coming up here shortly. But man, we are headed into a Week 8 bye for the Kansas City Chiefs. We do not have a game, as I'm sure you're already aware of. It's much needed. It's very good to have a bye week in the literal middle of the season, especially right before the trade deadline. So any acquisitions who get made, they get a week plus to get a little bit of studying in, get accustomed to their new home, and really get to work on some chemistry with teammates. But before we get into all that, we've got potentially one of the best ever Tybo's top fives coming right at
you. No pressure, I guess. This one was requested by Mark on Twitter. I'll get his @ this time so he doesn't feel left out. This is at Mr. Nichols _709.
Thank you, Mark.
Don't know what this guy looks like in person, but I have played Apex with him. So I know his voice. But he shot me 2 suggestions on Twitter, and I'm taking his top 5 ways to prepare potatoes. And I do have a top 5 and some. I have 2 honorable mentions. I'll get into those. My honorable mentions are basic, but probably the most popular ways that people get their potatoes: mashed and French fries. Now, I can certainly fuck up some mashed potatoes. I like to leave a little bit of the skin on my potatoes when I do my mashed potatoes. You can mix up the flavors as however you want, but a solid garlic mashed potato, can't be beat. French fries, I don't personally do those very often, but I have before. When you're doing your own French fries, it's kind of hard to get the right consistency. So all the fast food restaurants out there that have their, styles down, kudos to them. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do it all the time, but yeah, if I'm feeling some French fries, I'd chef them up on my own. No problem. But moving into the actual top 5 here, my number 5, don't sleep on it. It's super basic. It's super easy. Breakfast potatoes. Not hash browns, the chunked breakfast potatoes.
A little bit of peppers, some bell peppers in there. Some onions.
I love breakfast food. So, I mean, I can't count out breakfast potatoes. And I boil them really quick to get it soft on the inside, and then I pan fry them to get them nice and crispy on the outside. So it's like a really good consistency when you're eating them. So I'm pretty proud of the way that I make my breakfast potatoes. Number 4, I played with this, didn't know if I wanted to include this or not, but a hot German potato salad. Hot potato salad.
Yes.
Dill, red wine vinegar, bacon. That's really all it is with your potatoes, and the flavor comes out fantastic. It's so good. They do have like
this.
Ooh,
they do have oh my gosh, get me hungry again.
They have like a creamy dill German potato salad, but I don't mess with that. I keep it pretty basic. Red wine vinegar, bacon, dill. That's it. So good. Number 3, I have the boiled, squashed, and roasted. So you leave your these are, you usually go for smaller potatoes with these. Yeah, you can leave them whole, or you can cut them in half. Boil them, smash them, stick them in the oven.
Also known as smashed potatoes.
Smashed potatoes, yeah,
nice and crispy. Usually use the red new potatoes when you're doing them.
Yeah. Those are delicious.
Fire.
And a little bit of extra work, but I mean, the outcome is just
Chef's kiss.
Number 2, potato pancake. I don't make these like a latke or the Jewish version, but I do like a hash brown potato pancake. I slice and strip it up, and then get it into a nice pancake. I serve this for dinner a few times. It doesn't have to be a breakfast thing. You can put the seasonings on it to make it a nice dinner side. But potato pancakes, I feel like slept on. So high up on my number 2. A lot of work to make, but the more you do to a potato, usually the fancier you can get it. Number 1, probably the most work out of all of it, but the work pays off. Good old twice baked. You bake it once, you scoop out everything, you make the twice bake however you want to make it, and you dump it back into the skins, you bake it again. Goodness gracious. That has to be the best way to make a potato. Most work by far, for sure, but twice baked potatoes, man, it gives me every time.
You've made me hungry, and I have already had dinner. That's fantastic. I'm sorry for anybody who's listening to this before their lunch hour. Your stomach is
You're gonna want some
I don't know.
potatoes.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This wow. I mean, the best top 5 undoubtedly that Tybo has had yet. Potatoes are so versatile. I will say I'm a little disappointed. Like the cheesy potatoes didn't make it on. And outside of the potato pancake, I have no disagreements.
You could
That's
make
just my
the
opinion.
potato pancake a cheesy potato pancake.
I'm not. I've
I
had
could
potato
do that.
pancakes. I'm not a fan of that, but cheesy potatoes. If you could do a cheesy potato pancake, you might change my mind. I have not had that yet.
You can get some chives in there too. Like I get you. I get you right.
Tribal always says he'd get me right with all this food that he's talking about cooking, but he never brings it. I never have no food from Tybo. I'm sad. Every time I go
Listen.
over to Tybo's house, we've been a couple times, only a few. His wife was always making the food.
Oh hell no! The Super Bowl party.
Yes, sir.
I was 50% me. Okay, we are a team.
Oh, it was a giant spread. It was amazing. Um, no, fantastic top 5. It's got my mouth watering. Um, which is the same way that I have about the news that broke today for the Kansas City Chiefs. The news was first broken. Let me make sure I get this correct. From a at Schultz underscore report, Jordan Schultz on Twitter. He reported at 11:27 a.m. Central Time that Kadarius Toney would be traded to the Kansas City Chiefs from the Giants for the Chiefs' conditional 3rd-round pick and a 6th-round pick. Let's talk about that a little bit before I get into Matt Verderami's tweet. Let's just talk about Kadarius Toney coming in as a Chief. Number one, there was a lot of people going a little bit crazy about we gave up too much draft capital for him. No matter whether you see this as a good trade or not, 2 picks, right? But let's look at what the picks are as a whole before we get too far into who Kadarius Toney is as a player. Number 1, it's a 3rd-round conditional pick. That is a compensatory pick that came from the Ryan Poole hiring as the GM, I believe, for the Bears. So that comes from the front office. A conditional pick comes after the round. So we'll finish with 32 picks or whatever that is there with the 3rd round. And then we will get into the conditional picks that have already been given to the teams. So that means that this is basically a 4th-round pick that was given up plus a 6th round. Now, when we get through what the conditional picks are for the 3rd round, the 4th round, the 5th round, and the 6th round, right before we start the 7th, you're basically looking at what would be probably an 8th or a 9th round pick if we're looking at this at 32 picks per round only. So we're giving up what would be a 4th round pick and probably an 8th, maybe a 9th round pick when it comes down to it for a guy who has 3 years left, or 2 years after this season left on his rookie contract at $1.2 million per. So he's coming in at about, we're halfway through the season, about $600,000 left on his contract, which goes towards the cap, which were around $4 million. So we're back to 3.5, three and a little under. For this season, it's 1.9 or 1.2 for next season and 1.2 for the following, making it his fourth season in the NFL, not including he was a first round draft pick. So that means that we have the option to sign him or to extend him for one more year on that 5th-year deal should he pan out in Kansas City. Now that we've got those out of the way, just the facts, Tybo, talk to me, baby. What are we looking at Kadarius Toney? Because I can tell you from my perspective, I love this kid.
My expectations are a little reserved, I would say. I mean, he's not even the wide receiver I wanted us to get, because there were rumors that we were talking to Houston about getting Brandon Cooks. I like the skill set. I don't like the fact that he's been in and out of or on or off the injury list. This is a second-year player, right? He did not just get drafted. Yeah,
correct.
And I know he's had a little bit of injury trouble. And real quick on the valuation, I like, especially the layman Chiefs fans. Like, we know how fickle these Chiefs fans can be on Twitter. When you look at Robert Quinn going for a 4th rounder, and then you look at Kadarius Toney with 2 picks, they probably don't quite understand. Like, Robert Quinn is aging, more money on his contract. Kadarius Toney, second-year player, not a whole lot of money on the contract, which, like, that's a higher value in and of itself. Like, someone with a higher contract that you're gonna have to pay more, you're gonna be able to negotiate that more in those trade talks versus someone who is on a rookie deal. But I would say I'm fairly excited. I think Kadarius Toney could have used a scenery change, because I know there was some high expectations for him this season, and he's not really played much in New York this year. So I think, that's kind of the Chiefs' MO is you pick up someone who had a lot of promise that has, like, disappointed or, like, gone through, like, some sort of rough patch. So I think he fits what Andy's trying to do, but it's not necessarily who I wanted.
I'll start off with your first comment was Brandon Cooks down in Houston. That there was the tweet that came out from a few places that the Chiefs had inquired about Brandon Cooks. That was never going to happen. It wasn't. He just signed. It was a 2-year, like, it was a 2-year, $39 million deal.
So the money wasn't going to work regardless.
The money wasn't, and, like, unless we go to Houston and say, okay, we're going to give you a lot of draft capital, and what you're going to do is you're going to eat his contract, which is the only thing that they would have done. There's no way we're bringing in Brandon Cooks. It's no shot, and we're not giving up the draft capital that they want. He's not old. He's not young per se, but he's also not old, so that wouldn't have worked. Robert Quinn would not have been a bad pickup. He's on a downturn this year, but I think he's the most double-teamed player in the league on the defensive line. So that would have helped out immensely with 2 guys that can just eat double teams. And the sad thing about the Chiefs not doing that, which, again, I wasn't somebody who wanted to bring him in because of the contract and because he's an older player, and the way that we're trying to develop this team is go younger with young rookie contracts. Robert Quinn, the Bears ate 90% of his contract. He's going to be playing. I think the Eagles will be paying him like $700,000 to play for this year, and I think the Bears are eating a portion of it for next year.
But the Eagles really had the leverage there because the Bears have a lot of money on their books, like, or freed up on their books. Like, they could eat that contract and not really blink an eye at it because they're, the whole controversy with Roquan Smith. They have all the money to pay him, but they just
Yeah,
weren't.
no.
So
I honestly at this point I don't think Roquan Smith with because I believe that him and Robert Quinn were like really good friends. He was crying in that
yeah,
presser that he was doing. So I don't know. I think they've jerked Robert or Roquan Smith around enough that he just doesn't want to stay there, and I can't blame him.
yeah.
Um, you had mentioned the injury troubles with Kadarius Toney. I'm a little more up on Tony's injuries since he's been on my fantasy team in my dynasty league. Um, we talked about it a little bit in the last show that we did. I believe Tony, which by the way, I called this out. If you guys didn't don't remember, it was our post game from week 7. I had mentioned that Kadarius Toney was on the trade block, and I had mentioned that I'll make sure to throw it out on Twitter so you can see it. But I had called out that Chiefs were going to be interested, and sure enough, it happened. But for his injuries, man. So we talked about it. He didn't come in until week 4 of last season, his rookie year, because he was just low on the depth chart, and he came in when Sterling Shepard came out, right? Um, and then he's fantastic. You get him out there, you look at him on the field, which is one thing. Lance the Spoken at Lance the Spoken on Twitter put out a bunch of tweets, and I was like, dude, I had to correct him, which he didn't probably look at any one of them because he's a little bit larger account. But like you go watch this game film of that guy, and he's out there tearing up the field. Do you know what his comp was coming out of the draft? Tyreek Hill. He's
We'll
six
take
foot
that.
good. He's 6 foot tall. He is a return specialist, 6 foot tall. I think he's like a buck 80, and he runs I think his 40 time during the combine or his pro day, whatever it was a 4.39, which he can run much faster than that. He's super shifty if you watch his film from the Jets last year
Has he
or
returned
the
any
Giants.
kicks in the NFL? Punts or kicks?
I don't believe he's returned for touchdowns, but he was like their number one receiver
No,
last
I,
year because
I'm
everybody
not
was
just saying for touchdowns. I just mean
yeah,
like,
yeah,
has he actually fielded kicks in the NFL?
let me take a quick look at that.
Because you think that like made us more interested with the troubles that we're having trying to get a punt returner.
He was a specialist in college, I do know that. Um
So it would at
so
least be a
that
better than Sky Moore, who didn't have
correct. Yeah,
punt
yeah, yeah,
returning
right.
experience.
And I am almost for certain. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Last year, ten, he had one punt return. He had no kick returns. So he has
Well, that's
fielded.
fine. Yeah.
Um, he is available to do that, and he was that's the difference between him and Sky Moore. Sky, I thought he was a specialist in college. Was not a specialist in college. He did not do that. That is one thing that Kadarius Toney was known for going into the draft. To go back to his injury, so he didn't play until week 4. I think he played another 7 weeks, and then he did get injured at the end of the season. But that was also partially, I think he could have came back in and played, but they decided to pull him, knowing that he was going to be a focal point of their offense going into this year before their coaching change. And so they just wanted to keep him healthy. And we get into this year, and in the off season or before the season, he had requested a trade. Didn't name any specific teams that we know of. But then I think he got like 3 snaps in game 1, and then they gave him the injury designation, which you had mentioned he didn't practice for after October 5th. I don't think it's an injury because he did tweet out, and Sean had mentioned it. Let me find that here. He has since deleted that tweet. He said that joke would have been funny if I was actually hurt still. LOL. Irrelevant people don't get updates. Now I don't know exactly who he was replying to there, or if it was just a subtweet, whatever it is. But the injury doesn't seem to really be an injury. It looked to be most like he was having a poor attitude after asking for a trade, after not being utilized in their offense, potentially through camps, that he wanted to be. And then now that tweet just signifies that he's not injured in any way and ready to come in and be a participant in this Chiefs offense.
Well, let's hope he's motivated to actually play for us and not bring more of that bitchy attitude because like if that's all it was, like that's fine. But um yeah, through a year and a half of him being in the league, the injury frequency or what seemed to be the injury
Yeah, yeah.
frequency outside looking in was definitely concerning. My hope is we get him to work through this bye week and he can start returning punts next game. Maybe get Sky Moore a little bit more involved in the offense, um, and get his confidence up. You know, because I mean he's been doing nothing but dropping kicks back there. As we, you know, ease Kadarius Toney into the offense.
I have a feeling, knowing, having watched a lot of his film from last season, um, he's an electric player. I have a feeling before the playoffs come in, he will have passed McCole Hardman, Sky Moore first, and then McCole Hardman for the number 3 wide receiver position. He is that good. He is shifty off the line. He is shifty in the middle of the field. He is very hard to tackle. You can go back and watch any of his highlights, and you will see he makes defenses run into each other, not into him. He is crazy shifty with game changing speed. Or more so acceleration. He does have that game changing speed. It's definitely not Tyreek or McCole Hardman speed, but he's very shifty out there. Reminds me the way he
You
can.
don't think he's as fast as McCole?
Dude, McCole's one of the fastest dudes in the league. Let's not sugarcoat it. That guy is he's not as fast as Tyreek, but we've seen those two race against each other, and he's not that far behind. He is not that far behind. He is up there. If you put him in a foot race with the other faster guys, like you take Tyreek out, I think he's beating everybody else in the league. I think there may be
So
some close calls like with DK Metcalf, but I think he's beating everybody else.
so you mentioned earlier in the snap group, um, you think this kind of means that we don't bring back Juju next year,
This
and
100% means that McCole is not coming back. Yeah, like
okay,
I did
because
say
that's what
that,
I
but
was gonna say. Like if he surpasses McCole on the depth chart, like you're predicting here,
Mhm.
I think it's a better idea to lock up Juju for maybe 1 or 2 more years and let McCole walk. Even
so
though I
that,
love
yeah,
the guy, like I mean,
yeah.
I feel like that just makes a little bit more sense for the offense.
No, it does. I would agree with that. Number one, it 100% means McColl's not coming back. It's not. He doesn't have a place in the offense. He doesn't. He's not a return specialist. He's not very good at returning. If especially if Tony can take that job from him, from everyone else, which I don't see that being a
I think
problem.
McCole went to the Pro Bowl 1 year as a returner.
He did. He wasn't very good. It was his rookie year. It was
No.
a down year for all returners that year. It was very, very bad. Um, it means McColl is not coming back. I am 100% confident in that. Unless like he can stay on this pace and turn into a better receiver over the last 2 weeks, which I just don't foresee. It's like saying MVS is going to continue his pace from what was it, week 4, week 5. It's just not possible. It's not sustainable. Now, I think that this means that Juju is most likely gone. But before the trade even happened, I was already thinking Juju is gone. You and a lot of other people are talking about let's get Juju locked up now or as quickly as possible, right? Juju is avoiding eye contact with anybody who makes contractual decisions. Why the hell would he sign a long term deal now? Unless he's worried about the injuries coming back up, which no NFL player should be. They should be thinking longevity, long term, and long term cash. That's exactly what he's thinking about. He should be rejecting to speak to, if you are Juju, you should be rejecting to speak to anybody in the front office because you just had two amazing games and are now on pace for over 1,200 yards, which puts you at the best pace that you've ever been on in your career. Juju was on a pace to break what he did in his rookie year in Pittsburgh behind Antonio Brown.
I
Um,
thought he had a 1,400 yard season one
did he
time.
have 14? I thought it was 12. If it's 14, then I'm way off. I thought it was 12.
Just a couple
Um,
hundred yards, but.
but he's on pace for that 12 to 14, which puts you in that elite group, at least to be paid. And if that's the case, can Kansas City afford it? I believe we could. Will we pay it? I think we have too many issues on other parts of the field to be able to go out and spend that type of money for what would be a number two option. I would love to keep Juju here if he was willing to take somewhat of a team friendly deal, but guys in the NFL aren't looking to do that. I think Juju's gone regardless of this trade for Kadarius Toney. But I think bringing in Kadarius Toney is a backdoor plan. Number one for McCole, and number two, it's going to be for Juju.
Well, and I don't think long term for Juju is in our best interest. I'm saying 1 or 2 years. If the number's right, if the number works for both sides, 1 or 2 years I think is fine. But if you look further than this year, the only two receivers for next year are Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney. There are no other receivers on the books for next year.
MVS is on the books.
And oh, 3 years, 3 years.
He's
That's
got a
right.
three, but there is
Forgot
an
about that.
out after this year. The dead cap is
Yeah.
only 4 million. So if things are not
Which
working
you
by the end
think
of
we're
the
going to let
season,
him go because you don't
I
like him.
I don't like MVS. If he continues to play the way that he has been playing, I would 100% get rid of him. There's not a question in my mind. Get him off the books. And to be honest, I understand the health concerns if that's what it is with Kadarius Toney. If the health concerns can subside, it would not be out of the realm of possibilities in my mind that he would could become our number one wide receiver.
which
Be
we know,
obviously the number two behind Kelsey, but the number one wide receiver overall.
which we know it can be done because Travis Kelsey, Tyreek Hill, they didn't miss very many games while they were with us. But then we also know the other side of it, like Jamal Charles, latter part of his career, Priest Holmes, latter part of his career. The people that get used a lot in the NFL tend to get hurt. So we'll just see how that goes.
It's very exciting news, regardless. I am excited to see Kadarius Toney. I like the kid a lot. He's going to be good. He's going to be very good in this offense. One thing to mention about Kadarius Toney, he was at one point in time, I believe, even while he was at Florida being a Gator, a quarterback. We've seen
Really.
him throw. We've seen him throw passes in New York. Kid's got a
And,
cannon.
and he's just salivating. He's like,
Oh,
yeah,
he's
give
got
me my
everything.
double reverse
He's like,
pass. Like,
please, please, for everything that is holy, keep this kid healthy and in the playoffs so we can pull off some BS to really stun these teams. It's possible. I wanted to talk a little bit about another tweet that came from Matt Verderami before we get any further into the show. Uh, Per Matt Verderami, my understanding is the Chiefs are still in the trade market for additional pieces if something makes sense for them. Despite acquiring Kadarius Toney, KC still has a bevy of picks, giving it the ammunition to bring in more talent. When he says my understanding is, that means he is referring to conversations that he's having behind the scenes with sources. So, and Verderami is plugged in Kansas City.
yeah.
Uh, I have had
Defensive
issues with
line, defensive
earlier tree.
line, defensive line. Please, please, please. I don't care if it's a tackle or an end at this point. Give us somebody else on the
Oh,
D line.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As long as we get help one way or another, interior, exterior, it doesn't matter. Now there are a bevy of names that have come across: Marcus Davenport, Montez Sweat, Josh Allen, and the name and list goes on and on. Brian Burns is clearly out. It would have happened for the Kansas City Chiefs or anybody else in the league
Well,
if that was the case.
I don't know what the numbers that people were referencing that saying Brian Burns was so great, but if you look at that chart that you commented something on it about how bad Karloftis was on it. Brian Burns isn't that much higher than Frank Clark on that chart.
So it was a tweet from at PFF underscore Moo in there for the interior pass rushers, which was a really high notice for me. Chris Jones is leading in expected average raw pass rushing grade versus his actual pass
He's
rushing grade.
CJ is the highest graded defender, period, according to PFF.
Very, very good. And then you look at the edge rushers, in which case George Karlaftis is actually one of the lowest for his expected versus what his actual output is. And I did talk about it on the last show, Tybo, where and I had even actually no, I didn't talk about it on the last show because the video from at In Harm's Way 19, friend of the show, put out a comp from the 49ers game. I don't know if you got to watch that yet,
I
Tybo.
did.
It
I
was
did.
every single pass rush by Karlaftis where it's god awful. And I can now completely 100% without a doubt say that I am off the Karlaftis train. I clearly wasn't on it at the beginning of the season. I started to cut the kid slack because he was leading the league in pressures and he was the 31st great PFF graded or ranked defensive end. But realistically, you look at this kid and what move does he have? Bull rush. He may have a push pull in him, but it's not used very often. And the issue with that is it still requires what? A bull rush. And so he's getting all of these pressures, which fantastic. You're making the quarterback move, except the quarterback's going into open space because the rest of the D line sucks. And the issue that you're providing Karlaftis is that even though you're getting a pressure, there's still a man blocking you in between the quarterback. Your pressures mean nothing.
Yeah, half a sack. I mean, when you look at the amount of pressures that he has, half a sack is just like you look at that on paper and it's like, well, what's actually happening? And he has no setup. The like, sure, you can bull rush, and then push pull, but then now that offensive lineman knows that's your trick.
It's your only
Like,
go-to.
what else is he setting up? There's no rip, there's no swim, there's no pin, there's no nothing. He has no hips. He's a forward and back kind of guy.
It's disgusting when I watch it. And yes, he's young. Yeah, he's inexperienced. He's only had so many things could change. Things could change. I'm not optimistic at this point.
What
I'm
needs to
seven.
change is bringing in somebody new.
And well, yeah, and that's part of the issue is he is one-on-one 99% of the time. You're telling me he's 99% of the time he's got one man to beat and he can't meet him? And this isn't just the 49ers against Trent Williams, the best left tackle in the league, against an offensive line who gave up 5 sacks and a safety to the Kansas City Chiefs' awful defensive line. Um, so this is every single game going against the Colts when they have an awful offensive line and an immobile quarterback. I mean, Karlaftis is just not doing it for me. Um, so I am praying and hoping that Verderame is right. Because boy, we've got the picks. Let's go get a young guy, not a lot of money, maybe a year left on it. Hell, I don't care. Go out and get Bradley Chubb. Go out and get Bradley Chubb. He's on the trade block after this weekend because the
The only
Broncos
other
are going
thing
to lose
about
to the
that is
Jags.
on that same chart, Bradley Chubb isn't necessarily like too much higher than Burns and Frank Clark. Like, he's right around that same area.
He is,
That's
but
the concerning thing to me.
on that chart, again, it is also a little misleading. You do have to add in a couple other numbers, which Karlaftis does not meet any statistical numerical data whatsoever. When you can go back and look at the film for Bradley Chubb and for Brian Burns, they are also highly double teamed. I think they're both in the top 10 for being double teamed percentage per game. Um, and they're still efficient in everything else that they do. They're still really good at run blocking, filling gaps, making gaps open for their linebackers and corner, DBs to run through. So those are two different options. Again, Brian Burns isn't going to go anywhere. Bradley Chubb will be on the trade block because the Broncos are going to lose and they're going to fire Nathaniel Hackett, which we'll talk a little bit more. Sean and I will during the NFL game or NFL podcast coming up here shortly. Um, but we do need to go after some young guys that do require a little draft capital, but are going to secure us. As next year we've got two edge rushers on the books. Got two edge rushers on the books next year.
You think if the you think if trades don't work out by the deadline, you think we take a shot at Dominican Sue?
I think it's possible, man. I'd really like to see it. Um, but I'll be honest. I mentioned it to another group of friends of mine when we first brought it up. Sue possibly coming into KC. I think it was around week 5 or week 6. Um, it would have happened by now. He would have been on somebody's practice squad learning a playbook if he was going to go anywhere. There's supposedly a bunch of teams that are like calling him and figuring it, trying to figure it out. Um, it's not going to happen. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's going to stay a free agent. He'll retire probably before the season starts next year because nobody wants him at 35 years old. Um, it's sad because I think he could still offer the Chiefs, especially, but other teams, I think he could offer something. But if we were
Just
going to
a
do
just
it,
a
we'd have
plug
done
in
it.
the middle, man. Like
If we were going to do it, we would have done it by now. We would not have brought in a guy like Danny Shelton. Wouldn't have. And there's a lot of people out there saying because I have heard it. If we're going to bring in, not Nandama didn't want to come in early. He kind of wanted to pull that. Well, we're going to see where these teams are. We'll jump in at half season and go from there. To be honest, a guy with 35, if he wants to play, he's going to play. If he doesn't want to play, he's going to sit out and he's not going to play because nobody's going to come calling. Uh, well, I wouldn't say nobody's going to come calling, but at that point, you're already half a season. You haven't hit anybody. You are going to end up pulling a Cole Beasley, and nobody wants that.
I can't take this.
Play one game and yeah, my body's shot.
Yeah, this shit sucks.
Tybo, we've been through 7 weeks. The Chiefs are 5-2. I said at the beginning of the season that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to be 3-3 through 6 weeks. I'm not too far off, but I was definitely wrong. We've been through 7 games. We're 5-2. We're playing better than I expected, much better, especially on the offense, still being the number one offense in the league. Or maybe we're still the number one offense in the league with the best quarterback, undoubtedly. We were playing much better than I had expected. Getting a big fat win against two number one defenses. I got to be optimistic going into what should be the easier portion of our schedule.
I would say looking at the schedule before the season, everybody was kind of like, "Oh shit." And if you would have asked everybody at that point, if we're 5-2 going into the bye week, are you going to be satisfied? I 100% would have said yes.
Yes.
I'm so satisfied. Now there was a bunch of stuff that kind of came out after a couple weeks of the season. And it's like, well, does the Chiefs' schedule look as scary as it was before the season?
Nope.
Maybe not, but we still played some really, really good teams. The fact that we are 5-2 after week 7, I think, is incredibly promising. There's still some of those games that make you go, I could see the Chiefs like playing down to the level of our opponent and shitting away a couple of those games. But on paper, it's kind of similar to like the Eagles. Like their second half schedule looks like a piece of cake. And there's a couple teams on our schedule that might not be a piece of cake, but the before the bye week was definitely our tougher part of the season. So the prospects for the latter half are fantastic. We might still even be able to steal that number 1 seed away from the Bills.
It's possible. They are 2 games ahead of us so far, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, looking at the schedule here, even before we had gotten the schedule, even before Nuke Hopkins had gotten the suspension for PEDs, we expected the Cardinals to be good. After that, expectations were tampered a little bit, but you still expected the Cardinals to be a better team than they are. The Chargers at the time that we played them in week 2 were a very good team. Now, clearly not so much because they only know how to charger. The Colts, we expected who they were, but we knew it was going to be a trap game. A lot of people were talking about it before the season even started. You knew the Bucks were going to be good, and we handled that one. We expected the Raiders. That's the big fault is the AFC West is much worse than we expected. We thought new regimes, new players. These guys are going to be good. Raiders pissed it away. Bills are who we thought they were, maybe a little bit worse. The Niners are who we thought they were. And then that gets us through the 7 games. Looking at the remaining 9 games, the Titans started off real bad, much better than I expected. Now 7 weeks in, Jags started off hot, now not so good. You've got the Chargers who are injured again. You've got the Rams who everybody expected to be Super Bowl contenders, have one of the worst offensive lines in the league that dampen everything that they do. The Bengals now with Jamar Chase out for 6 weeks, which we'll talk about in the NFL show, Sean and I. You got the Broncos who are awful. You've got the Texans who are really bad. The Seahawks, everybody thought they were going to be the worst team in the league, and now they're actually really good with a really good game against the Giants coming up on Sunday. You got the Broncos again, really bad, and the Raiders who 2-4, they could turn things around. Who knows? It could just be a chemistry issue because they played every single one of their games close. Uh, we've got 7. We've got 5 wins under our belt. We're leading the AFC West like we always do, and like we're clearly better than we expected, in a much better spot than we expected. What do you see going forward through the remaining 9 games?
So, like, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but like what we've seen through the first 7 games, I kind of predicted middle of the road defense. Offense is still stellar. Okay. There's going to be a couple of tough tests. There's going to be a couple quote unquote trap games. I think at this point, everybody's going to call every game that we have a trap game because we're better than everybody else on the remaining schedule. But, the Chiefs have a tendency at times to play down to the level of our opponent. So, expectation wise, maybe we pick up 1 or 2 more losses, but we're still going to have a really good seed going into the playoffs. The thing that's going to be hugely important to watch is how the Bills do and what that number 1 seed is going to shake out to be. Home field advantage in the playoffs is no joke, especially with the way they do the seeding now. Well, there's only one team that gets the bye, so that's huge now. So we know what kind of team we have. The Colts game is an outlier. The offense can put up 24 plus points on the best defenses in the NFL. And our defense plays good enough to keep us in games.
They do. They do. I'm excited for the second half of the season. We did talk about the pace that some Chiefs players are on in our post game show, which is very exciting to see that these guys coming in fairly quickly are getting a grasp and their chemistry is tight. You saw a tweet from Patrick Mahomes earlier today calling out MVS, Juju, Travis Kelce, and McCole Hardman now all to play Call of Duty. Maybe Pat doesn't know that you can only use 4 in Warzone. So maybe we'll have to see who gets cut at our next press conference.
Everybody sits in the party, but whoever performs the worst, they got to sit out.
That's how you play it. Yeah. That's how we played it growing up. That's how we do it now. A lot of things. Let's look towards the future. We will be recording right after the deadline for trades has been finished next for our post game shows on Tuesday. So that means we'll be coming out with that information immediately. We've got to look at where we're going to go for the future and for the rest of the season. Now, let's just take a quick look after the season. We will have no tackles, no starting tackles. We'll have Lucas Niang, who's injury prone. I'm not very excited about that. Andrew Wiley on a 1-year deal. Orlando Brown is franchise tagged. Don't expect him to come back. Whether that's a Chiefs decision or him decision, I think it could be amicable. Defensively, or still staying on the offensive side at receiver, like Tybo, like you had talked about earlier, man. we got MVS under contract, Sky, and now Kadarius Toney or Tony. Before it was before Tony got traded, that was the null and void. We had two, and still expecting MVS to be cut. Defensive side, LJ is due for a contract. Juan Thornhill due for a contract. CJ is nearing either re-up or trade. We will have Karloffagus, and we will have oh goodness, who's Jonathan Kando on contract, which Kando I have seen take no snaps. So that's not good for as highly as we picked him. We got a lot of spots to fill, man. What are you? Well, I guess what are your thoughts on this? And do you see us making any more moves within the next 5 days before we hit the deadline? Given we need those picks to fill those spots.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's like the only concerning thing that makes me very iffy and hesitant on are the Chiefs gonna make another trade? Because as you said, there's quite a lot of holes to fill on this team, and we usually draft fairly well. So I would like to keep as many of those picks as we can. But the front office's decision is really going to be: are we going all in this year, or are we going to kind of not put all our eggs in one basket and hold out for the draft next year?
I think we've already seen what the expectation is. I don't think we're going to move from that. If there's a move to be made with one, not at least one more year on the deal, not just this year, most likely 2 more years on the deal, then we'll bring in a guy that is on a rookie deal. Um, Most likely for low capital. Most likely that's not going to happen. Veach and Co. have already shown us what's going to happen. They already have. If we were all in on this year, which we knew this year was going to be a stopgap anyways, and it seems we're doing much better uh, than we expected. Yeah, we got holes to fill. We got picks. The draft is in Kansas City. I would say probably expect us to be moving up in the draft without losing capital, so potentially losing some players in the offseason to trades, more so than we go out and spend capital now.
You think we're
Let's
going to
run.
trade Chris Jones for a first round?
Uh, Brother, I wouldn't put it past him. So I'm not the only one who said this either. C. Harrison from 610 Sports Radio and I have been
He
on the same
100%
page.
thinks it's the last year for Chris Jones on the
I,
Chiefs.
I think it is. Number one, that opens up a lot of cap space. We owe him a lot of money. Now, it sucks. I love CJ. Dude is top two defensive tackle, and this year he could end up surpassing Aaron Donald. Like, no question about it. He is elite. He is the best of the best of the best. Will it suck losing him? Yes. One thing you've got to counter as a GM and as a fan, when to get rid of players. You may miss it by a year too early. You may miss it by a year or two too late. And those aren't what you want to time it perfect. And that 9 times out of 10 ain't going to happen. The issue is we need draft capital, regardless of if the draft is in Kansas City or not. We need draft capital. The way this roster is setting up, we need money to be able to bring in vets, or
And I
just
mean,
to fill out the roster. I mean,
the
go ahead.
way the I mean, I mentioned it earlier. PFF has him graded as the highest defender, period, in the NFL. His valuation would be at the peak this year or at the end of the season. So, like you said, it would suck to get rid of him. It would suck to not have him on the team going forward, but it may be our best decision. Like with all the holes that we're going to have to fill, that we're going to get the most out of him after this season. You wait till next season, you're taking a huge chance on that valuation plummeting.
Plummeting. Barring injury, no doubt.
Yeah.
Honestly, at the end of the season, even with 1 year left on his contract, I could see him going for two firsts. I could see him going for two firsts on draft day from on the same draft on the both in that. I could see him going for two firsts. I could see him going for as little as a first, a second, and a third.
That'd be crazy, dude. We dropped that news with the draft in Kansas City. We would
I,
Chiefs Twitter would just be like,
I dude, I'd have to stay off Chiefs Twitter for days. I don't think
bro.
like I'd be obviously very like we talked about very disheartened that it would happen, and I would be very upset. But the talent that could bring in, you have to think longevity, folks,
With a deep draft coming up.
in the positions that we need them in. Let's go real quick, Tybo. Before we get out of here, we've got 9 games remaining. Pull up the schedule on your phone if you would, if you can. Let's go through this really, really quickly and see where we line up. For me personally, I have us beating the Titans. Andy Reid has only lost 1 game coming off the bye week as a Chief. Uh, yeah, week 9 is a win, 10 is a win, 11 is a win, 12 is a win. I'm going to go ahead and give us a loss. The Bengals, a win against the
I think that's
Broncos.
a pretty big revenge game. I think we kicked
It,
their
it,
ass.
it could be, especially with Jamar Chase being out. I want to see how they play before we get to there, but I'm gonna go, yeah, win, 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 win. Is that 4? 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna give a loss to the Bengals, a win, a win. Let's give one more loss to the Seahawks, a win and win. So just 2 losses
I
in
think the
nine games.
I think the most concerning games are going to be the divisional games. So going to Los Angeles to play the Chargers, even with all their injuries, even they have a decent record still right now. It's not showing me right now, but
You're
they're
talking about
not
the
that
Chargers, I'm
far.
sorry.
Yeah. Did I say
The
something wrong?
four no no no. I just want to make sure I heard you right. Because I was kind of looking at
They're
some
four
other
and
stuff
three,
here.
right?
They're
They're
four and
right
three.
behind us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I mean the divisional games are what's concerning. I like the fact that we have the Rams in Arrowhead. I think that gives us a leg up. I also, with how bad their offensive line is playing, we probably edge them out in that game. So on the road to the Bengals, and then our divisional games against the Chargers, um, and let's say the Raiders, the last game of the season. Those are 3 road games that I feel like are going to be tough to win. I'm not necessarily worried about the Seahawks, and nobody else really scares me on this schedule.
Yeah, with me that gives us 2 losses onto the 2 that we already have. That puts us at 13-4. That means I'm giving at midseason. I'm giving the Kansas City Chiefs one more win than was expected prior to the season's beginning. Where does that put you at, Tybo? I believe you had said we were winning 13 games.
Yeah,
Are you saying?
and
Are you? Do you have us
I
winning out?
don't I don't no I don't have us winning out. I Of those 3 tough games, we probably dropped 2 of them. So I'm right. I'm at the same spot you are. 13 games. I feel like is a very reasonable and realistic expectation.
Losing 2 games would mean that we are not taking the number 1 seed home. I'll be
Probably.
honest. You look
Yeah.
at the Bills, at who the Bills have coming up. Losing 2 more games. If we lose one, we have a shot. We lose two, and I think that puts us out of the number 1 seed, most certainly. But I think that locks up the 2. I don't think anyone else is going to get really close to that. Who is a division winner?
Yeah. We can cross our fingers. We can hope. But I do feel like it's a long shot to get the number 1 seed. It's possible, but it's a long shot.
And it's been a hell of a schedule and a season so far. 7 games, 5 wins. Should be 1 loss, but I'll escape with 2. Um, Team is playing much better than I expected. Still have room to go. Still have a lot of room to grow. Make sure you catch us back next week, early in the week on trade deadline day. Hopefully there is some news to be. Hopefully there is news, but there is news to be expected, and big moves at that. So make sure to join us back on Wednesday, wherever you find it on audio platforms. Get it on YouTube. Make sure to drop your top 5 list that you want Tybo to do on our Twitter or in the comments, wherever you're listening. But most importantly, go Chiefs.
Go Chiefs!